You know, when you hear the words demonic possession, what comes to mind? Probably spinning heads and scenes from horror movies, but what if there's a real, scientific explanation behind it all? Today we're diving deep into one of the most terrifying supernatural stories ever told, and we're going to find out what was really going on inside the mind.
Right, so a lot of you have probably seen the movie The Exorcism of Emily Rose. It's terrifying, but it's those four little words on the poster, based on a true story, that are the scariest part, because they point to a real-life tragedy, one that's so much more complex and honestly heartbreaking than any movie could ever capture. We're talking about the true story of a young woman named Anneliese Michel.
So, let's go back in time. We're in 1950s West Germany. Anneliese was, by all accounts, a totally normal girl. She grew up in a quiet, deeply religious family. Everything seemed fine. But then, when she turned 16, everything changed.
Okay, look at this timeline. It just maps out this awful downward spiral. It all starts in 1968 with a fainting spell at school, something that just completely baffled her doctors. Soon after, she gets a diagnosis of temporal lobe epilepsy, but the medication doesn't seem to help. Her condition just gets worse and worse, leading to a decade of absolute agony that ends with, and get this, 67 exorcisms in just 10 months. And then, tragically, her death. As things got worse, her behavior became, incredibly disturbing. I mean, can you even imagine forcing yourself to do 600 knee bends until your ligaments literally tear, or barking like a dog for 2 days straight? To her terrified family, who weren't getting any answers from medicine, this didn't look like an illness anymore. It looked like a textbook case of demonic possession. But here's the thing. Anneliese's story, as famous as it is, isn't totally one of a kind. There are other bizarre cases out there that really make you question what we think we know about identity and the human mind.
Take the case of Michael Boatwright. Here's an American guy found unconscious in a California hotel room. When he wakes up, he has zero memory of who he is. Instead, he speaks fluent Swedish and is completely convinced his name is Johan Ek. I mean, how on earth does that even happen?
So this brings us to the big question, right? Are we dealing with evil spirits taking over a human body, like so many supernatural beliefs suggest? Or is there a scientific explanation? One that's rooted not in some outside evil, but in the brain's own complicated and sometimes desperate attempts to survive.
To find that answer, we need to step away from the language of demons and exorcisms for a minute. We need to step into the world of psychology. Specifically, we're going inside the dissociated mind. Now, you've probably heard the term multiple personality disorder, mostly from movies. But today, professionals use a much more accurate name, dissociative identity disorder, or DID, and it's exactly what it sounds like. A real mental health condition where a single person has multiple, completely distinct personalities living inside them. So how can an identity just split? Well, first, let's break down what an identity even is. The psychologist Carl Rogers explained it in 3 simple parts. First, you've got your self-image. That's who you think you are right now. Then there's your ideal self. That's the person you want to be. And your self-esteem? Well, that's basically the gap between those two. The closer they are, the better you feel about yourself. For most of us, this balance is what keeps our identity whole.
But in people with DID, the personality doesn't just stay whole. It dissociates. It breaks apart into these distinct personalities that are called alters. And an alter can be completely different. We're talking a different name, a different age, a different gender, even their own unique memories and way of speaking. It's wild. In one really famous case, a woman named Kim Noble was found to have over 100 different alters.
The person's original personality is usually called the host identity. Now, one of the most frightening parts of this is that when a switch to an alter happens, it often causes major memory loss. The host might wake up and find that hours or even days have just vanished. They have no idea what they did or where they've been. All they know is that time is missing.
So the big question is, what could possibly cause a person's mind to fracture so completely? Well, as it turns out, science has found that the answer is almost always the same incredibly tragic thing.
Study after study across the US, Canada, and Europe has found that a staggering 90% of people diagnosed with dissociative identity disorder have a history of severe abuse and trauma in their childhood. 90%. That's not a coincidence. And that right there gets to the very heart of this. Dissociation isn't some random glitch.
It's a survival mechanism. When a child goes through something so traumatic, so unbearable, that their mind just can't handle it, the brain does something drastic to protect itself. It splits. It creates other personalities to take on the pain, walling it off to protect the host from a mental wound that would otherwise be completely unsurvivable.
Okay, so now that we have this scientific framework, let's go back to Annalise Michel. Let's see if we can use this to solve the mystery of her possession. During the exorcisms, they identified 6 specific demons that were supposedly inside her. But look at this list: Lucifer, Judas, Cain. These are all the greatest sinners from her deeply Catholic upbringing. Even the historical figures like Nero and Hitler fit perfectly into the idea of pure evil in her European religious world. These weren't random spirits from some other dimension. They were manifestations of the very fears she had been taught her entire life.
Now, let's contrast that with what her doctors saw. They diagnosed her with 3 things. First, temporal lobe epilepsy, which we know can cause intense hallucinations. Second, anorexia, which explains her horrifying weight loss. And third, they noted her extreme religious ideas were actually shaping her psychological distress. Everything she was experiencing was being filtered through that intensely religious lens.
And this is the most critical, tragic part of the whole story. Annalise Michel did not die because a demon attacked her. The official autopsy report states her cause of death was starvation and dehydration. When she died, she weighed only 32 kilograms. In the end, her parents and the 2 priests were convicted of negligent homicide because her death could have been prevented with proper medical care. Annalise's story is an absolute tragedy, and it shines a spotlight on a much, much bigger problem: the dangerous stigma that still surrounds mental illness, and how that stigma is often made worse by how these conditions are shown in pop culture. Look, for every thoughtful and sensitive portrayal like Karthik calling Karthik, you get a dozen sensationalized ones like Psycho or Aparachit. They just paint people with DID as these violent, scary monsters, and that creates so much fear and misunderstanding. As Dr. Simone Reinders from King's College London points out, this is just so harmful, because the reality is people with DID are overwhelmingly not violent people. In fact, they are far, far more likely to be the victims of violence and trauma themselves. And really, that's the bottom line here. We have to normalize taking care of our minds. It's simple, right? If you had a heart problem, you'd go to a cardiologist, no questions asked. If you're struggling with a mental issue, you should go to a therapist. There is absolutely no shame in it. Mental health is health, period. So I'll leave you with this final thought to chew on. If what we've historically called a demon is really just a misunderstood illness, then how do we become better exorcists in the modern world? Maybe it's not about chanting prayers in holy water. Maybe the real exorcism is applying science, empathy, and professional care to cast out not a demon, but the suffering itself and help heal a wounded mind.